Hi, everybody. I do have a slide introducing myself, but my name is Leah. It's nice to see everybody, and I'm excited to be here. I've just been really impressed with grade 110. I'll get started and then I'll kind of get to, oh, well, that's my first slide. So about me, or like what I'm doing here, I teach social media marketing and influencer marketing at UCLA Extension. I've done it for about 2.5 years now. I'm actually teaching a class next semester that's going to be the business of being an influencer. So typically I teach from the side of the creator or the influencer and helping them negotiate business deals, figure out their branding. Oh, hang on, why did that just... Sorry, I'm not sure why my slides skipped ahead. So yeah, basically helping them more from the creator side. But I have worked with plenty of large and small companies and founders and creators in helping them with their working with influencers and figuring out how to incorporate those into their marketing mix. Right now, I'm actually working with an influencer who is a influencer turned entrepreneur. She has her own fitness app. So I'm helping her with her content marketing. So I've come at this from all different sides. And hopefully the slideshow will not just start skipping ahead. What we're going to cover today are influencers worth the hype. I'm certainly not, because I come at it from all sides, I will not be the person that's going to come in and say, you have to use influencer marketing, hire a micro influencer, this is what you should be doing. Absolutely not. I think it's very different for every industry, every company. So it's really about figuring out if it's the right thing to do. And sorry, I'm not sure why my slideshow's on automated. What to look for in a partnership, how to find influencers, what to pay influencers. And then, as Elizabeth mentioned, there was 2 checklists, a campaign checklist, overall campaign checklist, and a deliverables checklist in terms of what you're asking for from influencers. And just before we go any further, I just want to check. I don't know why the slideshow is... Maybe I'll do a presenter view. No, because you guys can still see the presenter view, right? Are you able to see, do you see just the slideshow, or are you seeing all my other slides as well?
All of them.
All of them. Okay. Do we have any PowerPoint experts in here who know like what to do when the PowerPoint just keeps, when it's automated or playing kind of on an automated slideshow?
You might be able to go to slideshow and see if you have it on timed. Just like the slideshow tab at the top.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in there. Let's see. All right. Maybe I'll present it like this. As long as everybody's able to, are you able to see the slides in this format?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. And sorry about wasting everybody's time with this. I'm not sure why all of a sudden it started auto playing, but I feel like if I keep going, it's just going to be distracting for all of us. So one of the first things, before we even dive into this, I wanted to know what everybody's perception was of influencer marketing. I did just a poll a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. Just because the word influencer is really loaded word, and people have a lot of different impressions and attitudes towards influencer marketing. And so people on Twitter, like very informal, unscientific poll, but people hated the term influencer. And so I'm curious if anybody here has like good, bad perception of influencer marketing.
I do not enjoy working with influencers.
Okay. Oops, I'm trying to kind of stretch sorry, I can't see who is talking.
It's Jamae. My name's Jamae.
Okay.
Hi.
Have you worked with a lot of influencers before?
I tried it a couple last year and they didn't post. They didn't post on time. The post came down. The prices were outrageous. Like, I think influencers can be very influential. I just can't seem to find the right one.
Okay. What industry? I'm just curious. What's the industry, or what kind of area do you work in?
I own a men's swimwear brand.
Okay. Oh yeah, I feel like fashion and beauty. So fashion and beauty are probably like the two most popular industries to use influencer marketing. But I think that like fashion and travel, or like general lifestyle is kind of where you can, yes, can be problematic in terms of like establishing trust and finding the right kind of influencers. And they're so broad and so popular that I think a lot of people, it's very hard to like figure out who's an expert or like where the expertise is, rather than just somebody that's like, yes, I'm a fashion influencer, because I take good selfies, for example.
Mhm.
So yeah, I recognize that. I definitely recognize that. And so the whole talk tonight is kind of skewed towards that, and trying to like broaden the perception of what an influencer is, to avoid working with the type of people that are just like charge you a bunch of money, either don't post or post, and you really get no return on investment from that. Does anybody have any good impressions, or has it worked with influencers and feels positive about it?
We've worked with a few small scale ones, like through affiliate payments, not actual like paid campaigns. And
Okay.
we've had success from that. And they've been very authentic in their like stories. And so it seems like that resonates with our audience. But we are actually doing our first paid influencer campaign next month. And so I am a little bit nervous about what he said.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And we won't necessarily go through the checklist that I sent, but both the campaign checklist and then the deliverables checklist is, I'm a worrier by nature. And, anytime I've worked with influencers on paid campaigns, it's like just creating lists of everything that could possibly go wrong is just the thing that I do. And so I created these two lists so that as you're looking through, there's like, one of the things is making sure like during the campaign, who is the point person that is going to look to see that the influencer has posted, that the hashtag or handle is correct, that everything is working, that you're like measuring analytics. And then if something goes wrong, who is the person that is going to like alert everybody and actually contact the influencer? So that is definitely something to think about. I noticed somebody else, Caitlin, you were about to.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've never worked with an influencer, but I'm from a consumer perspective, like I still do trust them in different ways, like depending on who they are, especially like I guess what you call them would be like micro influencers, like people that I follow, and like there are just people that I follow and trust, and so I do like believe in the idea.
Yeah.
From a consumer perspective, and now from an entrepreneur's perspective, like I see it as a really good route, though it has its landmines.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I think like that's good for us to all, I think we're all kind of like coming at it with a little bit of skepticism, and like I work in influencer marketing, and I also am, skeptical, and I know that it can have a negative reputation. So, moving forward with that all out in the open, I'm glad we had that conversation, and everybody kind of got to express themselves. So the reasons that it can be worth doing. So yes, there are grifters, or, people who you don't really get the return on investment. But in terms of, to Caitlin's point, it's like people do trust influencers. 8 out of 10 consumers have purchased something after having seen it recommended by an influencer. 60% of marketers surveyed said creator-focused ads have a higher return on investment than traditional ads. And then next year, CPG companies are expected to spend, 30 to 50% of their marketing budget on influencers. The entire industry is expected to be, I think it was 15 billion by 2022. So it's certainly growing. And anytime there's an article that's like, is this the end of influencer marketing? I think those are, people maybe that don't like influencer marketing and want to see it go away, but it's not shrinking. If anything, it's growing. And certainly, during COVID, the fact that a lot of people couldn't do any kind of like traditional campaigns, or people that would do like bigger budget influencer marketing, just marketing activations like events, for example, couldn't do it, but they could hire influencers that were at home, that were like available and affordable to be able to promote their products. In terms of why it's effective, it all comes back to relationships. People trust people, not ads. And that trust is like the trust that you have with your customer, the trust that you have in an influencer, the trust that the influencer has in their audience. And, you know, certainly as like ad blockers or just that like oversaturated landscape of brand messaging, that's very much why people trust influencers. So, you know, you're getting like a hyper targeted, especially when you work with micro influencers who have these very narrow, like hyper focused niches, whether it's around like food or fashion or travel, fitness, for example. You know, you're getting access to their audience trusts them. And that's kind of behind why it all works so well. So when it does work, it does work very well. There's also some science behind it, because I think saying like people trust people is like a very kind of like feel good, you know, soft skills kind of gray area, but there are starting to be different studies that come out. This one was from Whaler. Whaler did this neuroscience influencer study where they looked at brainwaves when people watched Instagram influencer ads versus traditional TV ads. And the influencer ads were 277% had more emotional intensity and 87% more memorable. And the memorable is important because, you know, memory drives, or emotion drives memory, memory drives recall, recall drives sales. So I think that because for so long, influencer marketing was just kind of like this very vague, like Wild West. People liked it. They just weren't sure exactly why they liked it or what the return on investment was. Now we're starting to see a lot more like data and studies come out around it about, you know, why it's so effective. So the whole thing that I'm kind of, you know, my thing and what I teach, especially when I'm in class, is like, you know, not to fixate on the word influencer. You're basically looking for somebody that has like a credible network that they've built, a community online or offline, and start thinking of it like in much broader terms as like, they might be content, all of these people could be influencers, or they could just be content creators, entrepreneurs, or founders like yourselves. You're all potential influencers. Your employees, industry experts, thought leaders like teachers and speakers, traditional media, athletes, artists, and actors, because those are more of the kind of the OG, like certainly celebrities were like the original influencers. And then your own audience as well as brand advocates, because we've seen that there's been certainly success in that. Glossier, which is a beauty brand. I was actually just talking to somebody at Revolve today, which is like a high-end fashion brand. They also use their, you know, their homegrown kind of talent, their audience essentially as advocates for them, doing unboxings, and they've turned those into paid partnerships. This was an example. So I just wanted to show the different ways that you could work with influencers, especially this is a, you know, I mean, it's not so much a startup now, it's a few years old. I don't know if anybody's aware of Hedley Bennett, which is an apron company for chefs and home cooks. She's LA based in downtown LA. Ellen Marie Bennett is the founder. And so her influencer, she's very much into influencer marketing, but has a really broad view of who influencers are. So thinking about, you know, the industry experts, that's chefs, like in the top left corner. They use chefs as their influencers. They use her, and you can see her down here in the bottom left. She herself is an influencer, a founder / influencer. They use typical food influencers who, her name is, let's just see, I have it, Alexis Debocek, and I think she was a recipe developer first. Now she's an Instagram and YouTube influencer. They use their customers in content that they put on Instagram. And then they also use, you know, celebrities or like celebrity cookbook authors. This was Chrissy Teigen, who is John Legend's wife and a model, but also turned kind of foodie entrepreneur. She has her own cookware line. She has a cookbook. And they sent aprons to her mom and her kids, who then posted that on their social channels, and they duplicated it. I thought this was a good example because it is a small and LA based business, and really kind of grasps that idea or the concept of, like, there are influencers everywhere, and it's not just thinking about, the person that has, like I said, like, that takes great selfies. You're looking for somebody that has like some sort of expertise along with their online audience and really has something to say beyond just taking good photos. In terms of how to pick or how to choose the one, um, predictable, reliable, measurable. So I think as you're looking at people and trying to evaluate, is this the right influencer for us? Certainly, and especially if you're right at the beginning and you're just starting to investigate influencers, predictable, an affinity for your product or brand whose audience shares that interest. I was on a panel with somebody who, in the hospitality business, they require credit card receipts from influencers showing that they've stayed. This was also pre-pandemic, so when we were all traveling, but they were a high-end hotel chain, and they require credit card receipts from the influencers that they're going to onboard into their influencer marketing program to show that the influencer has stayed or has paid for other high-end luxury hotel stays, because they want to make sure that this is really, something that this influencer is, both stays at high-end luxury hotels, has traveled within the past 6 months, for example, and their audience also kind of shares that interest in whatever it is that your industry is. Reliable, you want to make sure that they're posting constantly, and consistently, so there's no like big gaps. If you scroll through somebody's timeline and they stopped posting for 3 weeks, for example, that's kind of a red flag. Somebody that is a working influencer is going to be posting at minimum once a week, if not, 2 to 3 times, or preferably daily, particularly in Instagram stories. And the beauty of Instagram stories, of course, is you've got, if you're an influencer, you can have swipe ups, and the swipe up drives traffic, as opposed to, I would say stories are probably more valuable now because you've got that swipe up, so you're able to drive traffic, as opposed to a feed post, which is great for brand awareness and kind of, posterity, but you can't link from a feed post back to your business. So depending on what your goal is, that's not always preferable. And then measurable, looking at their engagement rate and reach efficiency. Engagement rate, and I actually included it, it's the end of the slideshow. I included a link to a couple of different free tools that let you measure their engagement rate. And I also have a grid so we can look at, what are kind of like baseline, engagement rates that you should be able to expect. Reach efficiency is really understanding, where is their audience? And this is certainly something, when I have this data is key, don't hesitate to ask for audience demographics and engagement. If you are hiring somebody or you're hiring a bunch of people, you can ask for screenshots. Certainly you don't have to just depend on them to tell you. You can ask for screenshots. Like, I want to see, your audience demographics, men, women breakdown, where your audience is, the reach of your audience, how many people click through the link in your bio. This is all stuff that they can screenshot and send to you from the Instagram app. And so you really want to make sure that, they're very much aligned. You might find somebody that has 500,000 followers, but if they're all in Europe or South America, that's the opposite of reach efficiency for you, especially if you're a local business and you're selling here. Does follower count matter? Not really. Popularity does not equal influence. Engagement is a lot more important than the overall number of followers. So you might have somebody with, a huge audience. If the audience is not engaged then that number is essentially meaningless. So you're really looking for the engagement rate that they have. And the engagements are the actions that their audience or their followers take on their content. So likes, comments, saves, shares, clicks. Particularly this year, saves and shares are two of the biggest metrics that, you know, most companies that I'm working with or other marketers are looking at. Saves or bookmarks are essentially telling you that they're going to come back to look at the content, and then shares is sharing, people, you know, sharing their content into stories. So, you know, having the sense that people are taking content from this influencer, putting it into stories, which expands the reach of the content, is really important. And as I mentioned, engagement rate. So this is really important, and it's important to kind of have a an understanding of, you know, what is the average engagement rate, particularly as your audience grows as an influencer, your engagement rate goes down. It's just hard to maintain the same level of engagement. So if your nano influencer is like approximately 5,000 followers or less, typically has the highest engagement rate. It's around, you know, just under 6%. Micro, which is like anywhere up to 100,000 followers, is about 3%. Macro is about up to 500,000 followers, is about 2.6%. You know, up to about 1 million, you're looking at around like a 1% engagement rate. So that means, and I'm terrible at math on the spot, but like 10,000, and anybody please correct me, math is not my thing. But if you're, 1 million and it's 1%, you know, that is a much smaller audience. Instagram throttles the audience that everyone has, whether it's, you know, brands or influencers. So that's essentially like 10,000 people that liked the content, commented on the content, for example, shared the content. The reach might be a little bit higher than that. Typically, reach is going to be a little higher than engagement. But again, reach is the amount of people that see the posts in their feed, for example, on Instagram. So reach is never going to be at 100%. Even if you're a nano or a micro influencer, if you have, you know, 1,000 followers, 1,000 followers are not going to see your post. You know, maybe you hope that the you know, 6% would be good. You know, the higher that you go, depending on what kind of industry that you're in, what kind of influencer you are, you know, I've talked to people that have, you know, a reach of like 30%, but those are typically micro influencers, and that's about as high as it gets. And that's like a really low follower count. So, you know, those are the actual people that you're reaching. If you're paying somebody who has 1,000 followers or 10,000, whatever it is, you're not paying to reach that entire audience. So that is also something to think about. We'll talk about that when we get to payment, is that, you know, start thinking about paying on that, the audience you're reaching, not on the follower total that they have, because you're not reaching 100% of their audience unless you pay to reach those people. And those are through ads, and I'll talk through that also afterwards. Will an influencer drive sales? Maybe. You really need to assess your goals before deciding which influencer represents the right partnership, and also, you know, just what the campaign looks like. Typically, you know, driving sales, you can drive sales. It really depends on, is it the right person? Did they have really high engagement? Typically, have they, you know, driven sales before? When you're asking them for their metrics and asking for screenshots of the type of stuff, like, you know, what is their, which posts have gotten like link clicks, for example, like the link in bio, you know, or if they've done any kind of, you know, tagged posts with product in them before, what's been the conversion rate. It's really important to understand all of that so you can like set expectations when you're going in. In terms of goals of the kinds of things that you might get out of an influencer campaign, and typically you can you really only get one. I mean, it would be great if you hire like a fantastic influencer and they drive awareness, engagement, and sales. That's kind of like the miraculous or the miracle unicorn influencer. Keep that person and just hire them full time. Because typically it's going to be, they're going to drive one thing or another. So it's either going to be, like I said, awareness, which is like video views or reach or impressions, earned media, which is, essentially like PR, engagement with clicks, saves, shares, direct response conversions. And that's where you're actually like, driving sales or lead gen signups, for example, or app downloads. And then one of the other ones that is also looking at, influencers or content creators as for content creation, like that might be your goal. You're not actually hiring them to drive awareness with their audience or to try and sell anything for you. You just love their aesthetic or whatever their style is. It maybe, they're a designer or a photographer, and you're hiring them more as a creator to create content for your feed and kind of give a branding, a visual, help your visual branding for your company. This is an example of a brand awareness campaign through creator content. So the influencer, and I'm going to say the middle post is the influencer sponsored post. So this is the post that the company paid the influencer to create this food board. The influencer posted it on their feed and tagged it with the paid partnership. And that's something that you do in the back end of Instagram. And you both need to be connected to, mutually approve this paid partnership. If you have an Instagram account, you want to have a business account, and the influencer should have a creator or business account themselves. And in settings, you're able to identify each other as partners. So then you get that paid partnership. That's like an automated thing that happens on the influencer end once you've approved them as like a partner. The brand, which is, I think it was a cheese brand, then took the content and also ran it. And you can see the one on the right, they ran it in their feed. So it became content for them. So not only did they get introduced to the influencer's audience, they then ran it as content in their own feed. The one on the far left is something fairly new. I would say really only in the past year have people been doing this, but because we know that when an influencer posts something, you don't get shown to 100% of their audience. You don't get 100% audience engagement rate. Brands have started taking influencer posts and putting money behind them as if they were their own ads. So it's actually called a branded content ad. That's the name that Instagram has given it, is a branded content ad. And it's essentially turning the influencer's post, as opposed to just the post that they post in their feed. This is turning it into an ad that you are then paying to boost to reach 100% of their audience. And it could even be targeted to other audiences. And this is something that you can do in Facebook Business Manager. It's a way to make sure that the partnership or whatever it is, the collaboration that you're doing gets the widest exposure possible. So instead of running your own ads through Facebook Business Manager, so Facebook owns Instagram. So, Facebook on Facebook and Instagram, instead of running your own ads, you're now running the influencer content as an ad for you, and you get to choose the audience targeting, whether it's to the influencer's audience or whether it's to a wider audience for your campaign. Then in terms of an example for a conversion driven example, this is Ami Song. So she has a clothing line that she sells herself. She also sells through Revolve. And so she is taking aware of the Instagram shopping tags. On the far left, you can see this is her post where she tagged the clothes. Then there's the label post where the clothes are also tagged. And then this is her in Revolve's feed where the clothes are also tagged. And you can shop directly through Instagram. This one is a really good example of, she drives product. She collaborated with Revolve. They came up with a clothing line together. And typically having that kind of like more involved, deeper partnership where the influencer is actually creating something for you or putting their name on something. So it's like a longer and deeper partnership is great. And then selling directly through Instagram. The only thing that I would say on this that I've talked to people who are a little bit uncomfortable is that if you're selling directly through Instagram, you're not getting that traffic back to your site. You're not getting the data. You're not getting like the lead gen possibilities of people coming back to the site and signing up for your email, for example. So, while I do think Instagram shopping tags are great and have really made it easy, and I think we're going to see more and more of that happening and people shopping directly from Instagram, so you can start selling through Instagram. I would say just the downside there is just that you don't own the data or the relationship necessarily with the consumer. But this is a really good example of, something that like, this is 100% conversion driven. This isn't about awareness or engagement. This is about sales. In terms of how you find and hire influencers, there's really 3 methods. One is direct relationships, and that's you reaching out one-on-one or from your company to the influencer and asking them if they want to collaborate. And it certainly happens all the time. The other way is through agencies. And then there are also online directories. And there is one free. There aren't a lot of free online directories. There's certainly no free agencies. Agencies always take a commission, and that's like, whether that's a influencer digital agency or a PR agency, there'll certainly be a fee for finding the influencer and then booking the campaign. I did find I have a bunch of directories listed at the end of the slideshow, and I did find one that actually lets you search for influencers for free. So I'm not endorsing their product, but it's just, I was trying to look for like some free resources. So I thought it was interesting that one of them actually allows you to search by geographic area, age, industry, and I'm trying to think, and follower count. So that's one way to do it, especially if you're trying to scale and you're running like larger influencer campaigns. Online directories are probably good. Otherwise, if you're doing like just a one-off partnership, certainly just reaching out to influencers and finding them online, whether you're finding them through, certainly being aware of the people that are interested in your brand. Looking at Instagram's recommendations next to everybody's name on Instagram. To the right, there's kind of like a drop down arrow that you can click and look at like who else Instagram thinks is similar to this influencer. So you're able to look at other accounts. Search by hashtag. So, whatever industry, bakers of LA, or, any whatever the industry is in, kind of looking at those like very specific hashtags. And then somebody had joked to me about looking at, for example, if you're looking for like high-end lifestyle or fashion influencers, looking at like who tags Nobu for brunch on the weekend, for example, or looking at who, especially among TikTok right now, all the TikTok influencers are going to BOA on Sunset. And so looking at like who tags BOA, and then, finding influencers in that way. Let's see, I see somebody in chat. Oh, what's the name of the directory? I have that. It's influence.co. And then I'll show you at the very end. I actually included it in the slides. Influence.co though is it. In terms of how much it's going to cost you, there's different models for hiring influencers. The first model is in kind. So that's gifting product or services where you offer something to an influencer in exchange for coverage. With a micro influencer, that might work. They might be willing to do it depending on what you're offering them. Certainly influencers get offered things for free all the time. So I think it really depends on the product or the service that you're offering. If you're expecting them to work for free, it has to be something that they're really going to want. And so that's, that's just something to kind of adjust to, because sometimes people are like, but I have the best whatever product. And depending on where the influencer's at in their career, if they're just getting started, they might be willing to do it. If they've been at it for a while and they have more followers and they have a great engagement rate, you could have like the greatest product, but they're not really going to be interested in doing it because they can get paid by other people. But that is kind of like the first level of, you give them something free and they either do a story or a post. Affiliate is them essentially selling and then getting anywhere from like 1% to 30% commission fee on sales. Creator fees is when you're hiring someone and it might be an influencer, but if they're a photographer or graphic designer, for example, you're paying them to create content for your company Instagram account. Then you're paying them based on what you would be paying somebody if you're hiring a video editor or a graphic designer, for example. So you're paying along those rates. Sponsorship, in terms of a fee paid directly for product placement or endorsement, is the most common arrangement between brands and influencers. That's probably like 80% of influencer marketing is, here is a check, here is our product. Please take a photo, put that in your feed, put that in your story. And that is the sponsorship model. In terms of the sponsorship model, again, it is still a little bit the Wild West in terms of, what is the pay rate. The original model paid on account size. So it was approximately $100 per 10,000 Instagram followers. Lately, as I mentioned, since you're not reaching the entire audience, or it's not the entire, not 100% of their audience is engaged, I've seen there's been a lot more of a shift to paying based on engaged followers or reach. And typically using your average CPM or CPA as a guide, so cost per 1,000 impressions or cost per acquisition as a guide. Certainly, if you've never done any paid marketing before, it might be tricky to figure that out. But I think there are, and again, I listed a couple of resources I'll show you at the end, of places that you can go. There's something called the Influencer Pay Gap, which is an Instagram account that anonymously shares influencers what they're getting paid based on what their industry is, what their following size is, and how much they're being offered. So that's a good place to start, especially if you've done no paid kind of marketing. If you have done Facebook ads, for example, and what your cost per impressions are, that might be something that you can use as like, if your average kind of like cost per impression is like 27 cents, you can start to calculate based on their reach or their engaged followers, how much you might be willing to pay them. So again, there is and I know that's probably, for anybody who was hoping that I was going to say like, pay them X, that doesn't really exist yet. It's really like wildly fluctuating. And it's also wildly fluctuating depending on if somebody has like a 8 to 10% engagement rate and a high following, you're gonna pay more than somebody that has like a 1 or 2% engagement rate, or a very small following, for example. Typically, I think, if you're just starting out, I think, depending on who I'm talking to, when I'm talking to creators and influencers, obviously I'm telling them to ask for, as much as possible, and kind of work on it that way. If I'm telling you, I'm saying like, okay, start with an in-kind. Would you be willing to post about us if we send you X for free? Then depending on the size of their audience and their engagement, it's like, okay, well, we have a budget for $100 for one post and one story. And kind of like working your way up from there. Certainly, I was just talking to somebody that she was an influencer and she has a partnership with a food, it's like a condiment kind of company. She has about 12,000 followers and her engagement rate is fairly low, but because she's a food influencer and she's also a chef and recipe developer, my suggestion to her was, offer to develop recipes for them, for which is much more valuable, and you will get paid for that, as opposed to getting paid for posting on your feed, which she still will post on her feed, but because her following and her engagement is relatively low, we were trying to look for like, how can she be of value to them? So I think thinking about it on the flip side, as business owners, it's, if you find a micro influencer and their engagement is kind of relatively low, but you do want to work with them, and they're asking you for money. So if you're going to be paying them something, say like, okay, well, what's the added value that I can get out of this? And, depending on what it is that they do, it could be, for example, like this food influencer, she's a recipe developer. So maybe they're developing recipes for you. Maybe they're leading a webinar for you. It's just getting creative with thinking of like additional ways to have them work for you. And that's actually in the deliverables checklist that I shared. Almost done. I have 5 tips and then a couple of different examples to show you. I would say my 5 tips for influencer marketing success: focus on recurring relationships, influencer ambassador programs, influencer merch line, anything where you can like collaborate with somebody or they can put their name to something, influencers in residence or an influencer council. Certainly there's businesses that have those. Anything that's kind of like not just like a one and done, especially since there is that trust, element to it, that relationship element, the relationship between you and the influencer and their audience. I think it's much easier if the audience sees that the influencer only posts about your company one time and then never again. There's kind of like that actually damages the trust that they have with their audience, and makes that not as valuable to you as something where maybe it's like once a month, or maybe they're post on their feed and also attend, if you're doing anything online like a webinar, or you can take some photos of them and include them in the graphics on your website, for example, so that people start to see that it's a little bit of a deeper connection and kind of a genuine connection. Track data obsessively, use custom coupon codes, UTM and affiliate links, so you know how each influencer converts for your brand. Critical is understanding like how much traffic are they driving, how many sales are they driving. So anything that you can do to understand the return on investment, on the spending of them, really important. Pay attention to shoppable video. Amazon, Instagram, and YouTube are all competing to win in this space. So I think that that's going to be something that we're going to be seeing. And that kind of ties into the next point too. Think of influencers as part of the sales funnel, since they can add a brand's shoppable tags to their posts as part of a paid partnership. Instagram, YouTube, and Amazon are all really pushing this shoppable video and also shopping directly from a feed. So that's something that they're all going to be pushing. So just kind of maybe you want to start thinking about that. Are you going to, do you decide that like you want to embrace that and use that functionality? Or would you rather just have them drive back directly to your site? And then trust creators. So, if you find the right people, typically you can provide guidelines, but I think influencers know best. They've grown their community. They have their audience's trust, and they know best how to promote your product to their audience. And I'll just go through, I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So I think I'm going to kind of go through this part really quickly. These were some different examples, case studies. This is a hat company. They have hired a well-known photographer. So not only does he take photos, of people for them, it's kind of like become their brand style. And so he posts both on his account and then on the hat company's account. And so he's really developed, he's a little bit like, he is an influencer, but it's also, he's kind of developed, their visual branding for them on Instagram. RitDye lets every influencer do their own thing and they post on their feeds. So you get these like really different types of posts that all point back to RitDye, which is like a cloth dyeing product. Macy's Style Crew. So originally Macy's had this, it was only for employees, but it did so well and people wanted to jump in that now anybody can join like the hashtag Style Crew for Macy's. And people earn 5% commission on sales. So this is using them, for affiliate marketing to sell. And then Athleta, they really use influencers, actors, activists, and athletes to talk about, different issues that women have to confront around the world and trying to create it's more kind of like activism and impact. And that's how they're using influencers. Again, just speeding through. So I'll share, Elizabeth, if you want to share this with everybody, free tools to measure Instagram engagement and find hashtags. So these are the links here. Free resources for determining what to pay. Influencer Marketing Hub has an earnings calculator. It's always going to kind of like slide up and down a little, but at least it gives you kind of like a base or an understanding of what somebody might ask. And then Influencer Pay Gap is the Instagram account that lists anonymous salary negotiations. Free tool for examining competitor ads. I don't know if everybody's aware of this. It's like a great little thing. It's Facebook ads library. So now trying to be more transparent, Facebook actually lets you look up anyone running ads on Facebook. And so you're able to see whether or not, for example, a competitor's running an ad, how much they might be spending, if they're using influencers in ads, what their copy looks like, what their creative looks like. So it's just a great thing that not everybody's aware of, especially if you're not in paid social marketing. Facebook ads library is terrific. This is the influencer, a list of influencer agencies and directories. Again, I'm not endorsing anybody. It's just kind of a starting point to look at. And this is the one, influence.co, that actually allows you, most of these are paid. This one actually allows you to look for influencers in their database free of charge. You do have to sign up, but it's free sign up. I signed up, I think last year maybe, and just checked today as I was going through to see if anybody was free, and found that they were. And then anybody who's looking for more information or is really interested in influencer marketing, there's 3 newsletters I recommend. One is from BuzzFeed called Please Like Me. One is called Influencer Dashboard from Business Insider. And one is called Influence Weekly. And it's just an independent guy that kind of sends out a link of all different influencer marketing campaigns and stories and stuff every week. So I'm going to stop there because I know we have, our time is limited. So I want to make sure that I have time to answer questions. I can also answer some of the questions that Elizabeth sent me, but I'm also happy if you guys want to just shout them out, and happy to go through those.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Jimmy, the men's and wear brand. How do you recommend holding influencers accountable for posting? So I ask because I've sent product to influencers before, and I mentioned earlier that you take it down or they don't post at all. I've thought about contracts. Just curious if you have any suggestions there.
Yeah, and do you have contracts or like a statement of work?
It's been very informal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I wouldn't let it be informal. And now when you're sending it to them also, are you paying them or are you just gifting them?
So I guess it would be in kind.
Okay. So in kind. I think if you're not having luck with that, then I would stop doing it. I think the problem with gifting, and especially if there's no contract, gifting is or in kind is really kind of a gray area. Because you're not paying them and there is no contract, they're under no requirement to post anything. So I think unless you build a relationship with somebody and really see that they do have an intent, or you send an email saying, we would love to send you X, but you must guarantee a post, and just be blatant about it. And if they don't want to do it, they'll say no. But otherwise, I think, gifting, influencers get gifted or so many in-kind packages or offers that I think it's tricky unless it's a really unusual product or something that they're not getting from anybody else. I just think that they're probably getting too much stuff, and so they're just taking it and they're well, if there's no contract, I'm just going to accept whatever this is, and I'm not going to post about it. I'm going to post about the stuff that's paid. So I would like, first things first, I would like be very transparent in, when you send them, when you reach out and say, hey, we'd love to send you something, but to be clear, we do need you to post about this.
Yeah,
and then,
they definitely always say, yes, I'll post.
then maybe, you get what you pay for. And if you're not paying for it, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's worth it. Even if you can attach like a small monetary value to it, send it to less influencers, but maybe people with slightly bigger audiences or people you really like. Like you could start at like $100. And then, you have a contract, send them a contract as well, or a statement of work that like explicitly lays out what what the requirements are.
Would you happen to have a template of an SOW that has been effective or anything that you can share?
Yes, I do. I can just, if I don't remember, connect with me on LinkedIn and just remind me. I will try to remember after I hang up. I'll send that to Elizabeth. But just in case I like,
Perfect. Thank
forget.
you.
Yeah, feel free to follow up.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I'll let others go.
Yeah, does anybody else have?
I guess I have a question around like using influencers for digital products.
Yeah.
I guess like one of the things that we really want to do is kind of try and, I guess, like how have you seen that been done in a way that is successful? Just because I don't even think that I have seen as a consumer, because it's not like showy. It's not easy to like show like, hey, I use this thing, besides like tagging.
Is there is it an app, or is it a like?
Yeah, so it's like it's a donation app. So
okay.
So I mean, my imagination is like they could give to their favorite charity through it or something, and then they could showcase that they gave to that charity through this app.
Yeah,
I
mean, there's to me, I think you'd want to make sure that the person had like a clear, somehow was like either like an activist or had like some clear connection to why they're donating, or it's somebody that talks about whatever it is they're like. I wouldn't just choose any, random influencer. I don't think so. For something like that, I think that you want to find somebody that's like an influencer that maybe is also very passionate about like philanthropy or giving back or volunteering, or whatever the cause is. Like if there's a specific cause that you think that you can get them to donate to, that the audience has heard them talking about before and is receptive to that. There is the donation, well, I guess then that circumvents your app. I was going to say, because there's the donation sticker in Instagram stories, but you don't want them to use that, because you want them to use the app. I've certainly, I've seen, I have seen, there's somebody on Twitter, I think her name is Caroline Ross, or Caro Ross. She does these like Twitter threads every once in a while, and we'll just like sit, or Caroline Moss. And she does these Twitter threads where she'll be like, hey, tonight I'm giving to, whatever the organization, like, if you guys want to Venmo me money, I'll just like pull it all together and let's get to like $5,000 by tomorrow night. Caroline Moss, MOSS. And I think she's an author. I think she writes novels, but she does do, like I said, you want to find somebody that like has this like philanthropic streak, or like is, asks people to donate, and kind of like that's built into their persona. And she does these things every once in a while, like every weekend. And so like I've Venmoed her money, probably like 2 or 3 times, where she's like, okay, I want to hit whatever, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 for, racists in Texas. She's done for all kinds of different causes. But, find somebody like that whose audience is accustomed to the idea of fundraising or donating, because I think otherwise, like just a lifestyle influencer is just going to be out of left field, and I think the audience is not really going to like embrace it because it just doesn't seem very authentic to what the influencer is all about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And,
just one more quick, like on top of that, when I guess like one of the things that actually, wait, we're almost out of time. Sorry. I'll go with someone else has a question.
If anybody wants to follow up, like I'm happy to, like if you want to, I'm on Twitter or LinkedIn, probably most of all. So if anybody wants to follow up with a question, like I'm happy to answer them there too. Because I know I tried to go as fast as possible. So I feel like I sped through it, but I still didn't leave enough time at the end. So I'm happy to follow up with anybody.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Around controlling content. I guess, what is your recommendation around how much you should control content? You just let them free and
for the most part, give them guidelines. Tell them what your brand guidelines are, for example, or like, hey, we can't have, I don't know, you talked about like, men's, I think it was like men's underwear. So it's like, are there any scenarios that you wouldn't want them to post? And you can let them know that. Otherwise, I think they probably have the best sense of like how to reach their audience. So I would be very hands-off. And I think typically the more hands-off you are, the more successful it is, because it just seems much more organic to, how this person shares with their audience.
Makes sense.
So like, and it's in the, in the campaign guidelines. It's like, give them the handle, give them the hashtag. You can give them suggested language or guidelines, but for the most part, just say like, we trust you and we know that you know how to talk to your audience better than we do. So, please use it in the best way that you see fit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We might have time for one more last burning question, if anyone has one.
Caitlin, did you have another question? Did you want to?
Yeah, I think it's like so specific.
Oh, okay. Yeah, follow up with me. I'm happy to answer like any follow up. I think a couple of things somebody had mentioned, Elizabeth, you had sent something about healthcare. There's a really interesting example that Khloe Kardashian is doing a migraine medication right now. BuzzFeed has an article about it. So if you're somebody asked about healthcare, I'd be very careful. There's ethical implications, but it's not illegal. I think you just have to check with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the FDA, and American Pharmacists Association, just to make sure that you're like covering all your bases and disclosures. Do you need a PR agency? No, absolutely not. You can do it yourself. What is the expected ROI in regards to influencer marketing? They say that, most data says that it's like $5 to $8 return for every dollar spent, but that's usually on earned media value, which is like running ads. So if you run your own ads or Facebook ads or, whatnot, it's typically that's like impressions or reach. So you are getting a really good ROI there. But if you're specifically looking to drive sales, that's different. And that typically is going to be perhaps like 1%. And you got to remember that when you're hiring an influencer, you're not reaching 100% of their audience. You're only reaching a portion of it. So you have to kind of like base your expectations for if you're only reaching like 10,000 of their audience and 1% of that convert, that's certainly different than if you're like paying somebody and they have 100,000 or 1 million followers and you're thinking that you're going to reach all those people and get 1% on that. No, it's going to be 1% on the 10,000 people that the influencer has actually reached. I think I think that's pretty much all the questions that you had sent, Elizabeth. But again, yeah, feel free, like if anybody has just any, couple of follow-up questions, Twitter or LinkedIn is the best place to reach me.
Well, thank you.